This is the build video for this Star Wars Gonk or Blink droid, the four-legged version. I want to start with the electronics. We have a boost converter here. This little module right here. This has 3 terminals on it. We have a switch here and a 3-volt or 2 AAA battery box right down here. To wire it, it's pretty simple. The battery, the positive goes up to the switch, the middle terminal, and from the switch down to this module you have a wire. That'll switch the battery power to the module so that it's not on all the time. If you ever wire from the battery, the black wire, the ground wire, just goes straight to ground here. The motor wires go one to voltage out and one to the ground. And it'll depend which way these are wired here as to the direction the motor runs. We'll get into that later. To assemble it, I put the battery in first. I've double-sided to tape the battery to the bottom of the frame module. With the electronics out of the way, let's assemble the mechanical part of it. First thing you need to do, you need to make sure that these shafts on these gears will spin freely in these holes in the frames. I used a little file to just clean it up. It didn't take much at all to make sure they're free, because the motor doesn't have enough power to overcome much resistance. So clean out all these holes, get them working good. I drilled these leg parts. I took an 1/8 inch drill, or 3mm would also work, and drilled out all these so these screws will pivot freely on there. That's important. I took a hobby knife and cleaned up the elephant's foot on this part. I didn't clean it up too much because it gives a little resistance to hold them onto the shaft while you're working with it. I also chamfered all these with a hobby knife to give these 12mm long screws, 3mm by 12mm long screws, a place to start threading in. Okay, once you get all that done, you can start putting it together. When you assemble these on this side and this side, they're 180 degrees from one another. So if this one's up, the hole in this one is up, the hole in this one is down. So let's try to do on camera. Yeah. Up, down. Now there's a little hole right here in this. I call the part the crank or something. You can put this filament in when you get it all done, and we get it all working. We'll be able to just stick a piece of filament in there with some glue and lock it in place. Or if it's tight enough, you may not even need the glue. So we got to do all 4 of those. My wire management is not so good. That's right. They'll be 90 degrees off if you get it wrong. There's only 4 sides to that shaft. Now, probably the best way to assemble it. You should be able to glue these on to the feet before or after this. I'm going to glue them on afterwards, but it should be able to get that part. There's a little groove right here. You should be able to feed that part up through there like that, even if you got the feet glued on. So you can't take it apart afterwards. We're gonna I'll fast forward through all this part. You don't want to see me running these screws in by hand. I've got the screws in. There's some slop in it. Now, we're going to do some initial timing on it. Hopefully it'll get it right the first time. What I'm going to do is I'm going to squeeze these in together like that, and hopefully that'll get us timed right. There's a little line on this gear that matches where the flat is. So with those held together like that. Yeah. Okay. Now we can run the motor and test it. So far so good. Now we need to put these sides on. I don't have them tight yet. Let's try it, see if it's still moving. So far so good. You don't want these screws tightened down. Everything needs to move freely and pivot freely. Might have got that one a little tight. Let's test it again. So far so good. If we were way off, it would bind up. You can be off and it's still not bind, but not walk either. These should be on the same plane if it's timed right. And these should be on the same plane. The diagonal should be on the same plane. We can test it now, even though we don't have our feet glued on. You can just slide them on here. Hopefully this will work. It has last night when I put it all together. That's a good sign. It's standing there by itself. Turn it on. Yeah, they just slide along. It's interesting. Might be useful for some other design. It does walk a little faster with the 5 volts than with the just 3 volts. That bolt, here's the other one, the test bed I was using. You can see this one is considerably faster. Have a little race. I actually like the slower movement better, but it is what it is. That this didn't have quite enough juice to overcome the weight we're going to add when we put the body on. Okay, so now it's time to start glue the feet on. I'm going to use this weld-on, this is a different brand, but it's 16 is the important number. This is what Robot Hut recommends for gluing PLA plastic together. I've never used it before, so I'm going to try it. I just put a little bit on here and slide the feet on. Try to make sure I don't get don't go there. Try to make sure I don't get the glue anywhere, but right down here. I don't want it getting anywhere and then binding something up. Have to glue the feet on the legs. Now for body, because of the print quality, on the first one I did, which I printed down like this on the print bed, I decided I wanted to print it like this with this end up to get these much sharper. Now that did work, and it didn't get this little mess right here on it. Looks much nicer. Does mean that you have to well, one I had to split it into 2 halves, and then I had to put a bridge down here, a sacrificial bridge of just 1 layer. You can see in there I had to trim it out. Doesn't have to be trimmed out accurately. You also have to trim out where the switch goes and poke holes where these screws come in. I had to put chamfers on here because another print I did, I don't have it here now, but this got to looking real nasty right here. I think it was pulling in. You can still see it a little. I think the sides were poking in before it printed the top of it. But this looks pretty decent. So I have to glue this together. I put some alignment holes in here. You can stick some just PLA filament in there, whatever you got, 1.75 millimeter for alignment pegs. I had to print it with a brim because of didn't want to adhere to the build plate on the corners for some reason. I was having trouble, so I had to clean all that off. I'm not sure I would have ever had this on this one. I liked this feature much better than this line here, but I didn't like the overhangs the way they were printing up here. These chamfers or fillets. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to glue these on. I don't know how long this glue takes to dry, so I'll do that off camera and then I'll come back. Well, I've got the feet glued on, so let's see it walk with them glued in place. Walks pretty quick now. Very stable. I glued the body together, so let's try to put it on. Well, one other thing, I need to tidy this up a little. I'll probably just take some foam tape and put that in here like this. For now, I think I'll just stuff it in there so we can finish this video. Do a little cable management later, or not. Now, there's a hole here for the switch. Hopefully this is going to fit on there. It should. Need to poke that up in there a little better. What I've been doing is I just line it up like this. Running something down into that hole. And then find where the front one goes. Well, that's not lining up all of a sudden. So we have our body securely mounted. Let's turn it on. Runs along pretty good on 5 volts. I don't know what happens if it steps on something. Not too bad. It's fairly stable. Well, that's it for the build video. There'll be a separate demonstration video showing just it walking. It'll only be a minute or two long. And the files will be on Thingiverse and some parts that you need. The files will be on Thingiverse and Printables.com. Well, thanks for watching.